We left off in the Gemara yesterday by the part of the Gemara Nishbachon Nizgal Sechule. We're talking about the storage of the water when you need to do the Nisuch HaMayim on Shabbos. You can't go to the Shiloach spring to get water from there on Shabbos, obviously. So you have to prepare it from before Shabbos, and you put it in a container. And you leave it there in the Beis HaMikdash overnight. The problem is that the Mishnah had said that if it spills out, or if it is uncovered overnight, it's no longer usable, and you have to get the water from the kior, from the laver instead. The Gemara's question is simply going to be, what's wrong with exposed water? We know that the problem with exposed water is that a snake may have come in overnight and placed its venom in the water. But the Gemara is going to tell us, but so what? You can remove the venom. There is a way of extracting the venom so that the water is still, it remains in its pure condition. So the Gemara says, Va'amai li'aver b'misnenes. Put it through a strainer, and really like a cheesecloth. You can put it through, pour the water through a cheesecloth, and the venom will remain separated from the water. Lema masnisan deloka Rabbi Nechemia. The fact that the Mishnah does not advocate that solution must mean that it doesn't go like Rabbi Nechemia. The Tanya misnenes yeshbo mishum giloy. The Brisa says that if you have a setup with a strainer, now the case that the Brisa is talking about is referring to a situation of making yayin konditon. Now, what is yayin konditon? It is a spiced wine. And how did they make spiced wine? They would take wine, pour it through a strainer, and the strainer had all different kinds of spices, cloves, persimmon, cinnamon, whatever else it had in it, and then the wine would slowly go through the strainer with the spices, and it would absorb some of the flavors of the spices, and that's called konditon. That's called konditon wine. It's spiced wine. So if you leave this system exposed overnight, so then you have a problem that the wine may have gotten snake venom in it overnight. So Amar Rabbi Nechemia, Emasai bisman shahatachtona megula, aval bisman shahatachtona mechusa, afal pisha helyona megula, inbo mishim giloy. Rabbi Nechemia qualifies that. He says, look, it's not a problem as long as the lower receptacle, which is catching the wine, the spiced wine, is covered overnight. Even if the upper receptacle, which is pouring the wine, is exposed and the strainer is exposed, it's not a problem. Why? Because snake venom is like a sponge which floats on top of water, and basically what it means is it'll separate easily from water if you put the water through a strainer. The fact that our Mishnah does not advocate that as a solution of exposed water means it must not hold like Rabbi Nechemia. So the Gemara says no. Afilu tema Rabbi Nechemia, Emar dama Rabbi Nechemia lahejot, aval legavoa mi omar. Maybe Rabbi Nechemia only offers this viability of strained wine as being viable even though it had snake venom in it, because the strainer removes the venom only when you're dealing with making it fit for human consumption. For making it fit for divine consumption, meaning using it in divine worship, even Rabbi Nechemia would agree that even strained wine that had the venom removed is not fit for use. Why? Because Velesle la Rabbi Nechemia, because after all, does not Rabbi Nechemia hold of the pasuk which says, Hakrivehu na lefechasecha? It says in Malachi that will you offer this offering to your governor? If you did so, would your governor, would your leader desire you or find favor if you offer him a defective sacrifice? Says God. And basically what we're saying is like this. Technically you're right, you can remove the snake venom. But once water had snake venom in it, even though it was removed, it's still considered to be defective as far as using it for Hashem. You wouldn't take water that had snake venom in it and was removed and offer that to your king, right, to drink. Here, king, it had snake venom, but don't worry, I removed it. You're not going to give that to a leader. You're not going to give that to Ribono Shel Olam. So that's why it's not fit. Okay, Hadron Alach Lula Va'arafa. So now we're going to talk about the Simchas Beis HaShoeva, and we talk about the Chalil, because we had mentioned in the previous mission, in the last parak, that the Chalil applies either 5 or 6 days in the Beis HaMikdash. What do we mean by the Chalil? We mean for the flute, the musical instruments that we're playing for the Simchas Beis HaShoeva every night of Sukkot, provided that night was not Shabbos or Yantiv, because we wouldn't play music on nights when it was Shabbos and Yantiv. And so therefore, if Shabbos coincides with Yantiv, with the first day of Sukkot, So then the last 5 days of Sukkot are Chol HaMoed, and you have 6 days, rather the 6 days, you have 6 days of Simchas Beis HaShoeva. If Yantif is if Shabbos is any other day other than the first day of Yantif, so then you only have 5 days of Chol HaMoed, in which case you have the Simchas Beis HaShoeva for 5 days. So Hechalil Chamisha V'Shisha Zeu HaChalil Shel Beis HaShoeva She'eino Docha Lo Asa Shabbos V'Lo Asa Yom Tov, and that's exactly what our Mishnah tells us, that the Chalil playing this music does not override Shabbos or Yom Tov, and therefore it's either 5 days or 6 days. Let's take a look at the Gemara. Itmar Rav Yehuda v'Rav Ina Chad Tani Shoeva v'Chad Tani Chashuva. We have a machlokes as to what the correct term for this celebration is called. One calls it Simchas Beis HaShoeva, which means the joy or the celebration of the drawing, and the other one calls it Simchas Beis HaChashuva, which means the simcha of the importance of that which is important. Amar Mar Zutra, Mandatani Shoeva lo mishtabesh, Mandatani Chashuva lo mishtabesh. Neither of them are making a mistake. There's merit in both characterizations. Mandatani Shoeva lo mishtabesh dichsivu shavta mayim b'sasam. That if you learn that it's called the Beis HaShoeva celebration, it's because it's called the drawing of the water. You shall draw water with the joy, right? Because we draw the water from the Shiloach. Umandatani chashuva lo mishtabesh, Omar Rav Nachman mitzvah chashuva hi uba misheshes yimei bereishis. And if you learn that it's called the celebration of importance, that's also has merit, because after all, we learned that this is a very important celebration, and that's why Hashem created those subterraneous caverns that the water can flow to from the times of creation. So we know that this is something that's very desirable to Hashem, and therefore it is chashuv, it is important. Tosfos makes a very important point. He says that the reason why it's called Shoeva, I mean, after all, you could ask the question, wouldn't it be better to be called Simchas Beis HaNisuch, the celebration of the pouring of water? I mean, the drawing of the water is only the prerequisite to pouring it on the Mizbeach. So why do we call it the drawing? So he quotes from the Gemara Yerushalmi that says that the word Shoeva is not just the drawing of water from its source, but rather it's Shamisham Shoavim Ruach HaKodesh Shehashchina Shora Mitoch Simcha. That it is the drawing down of the divine presence upon the people, that people will be instilled with Ruach HaKodesh when they participate in the Simchas Beis HaShoeva. That's really why it's called Shoeva. And we know that when there's joy, there's Ruach HaKodesh. When you're happy, that's when there's Ruach HaKodesh. So, and we know this from Elisha, because the pasuk says that he wouldn't have Ruach HaKodesh until a minstrel played music for him. We had a musician this morning. Now we have another musician here today. So today is your Gemara. Today's Gemara is just for you, Reb David. You're going to see there's going to be a only music is today.
That's why also Yaakov.
And
he was sad. That's why he didn't have Ruach HaKodesh.
Yeah, right. That's right. For all those years that he thought Yosef was gone. David HaMelech, the Kinor, right? And the Yerushalmi also brings that Yonah ben Amittai, the famous prophet Yonah, only had Ruach HaKodesh after he went to a Simchas Beis HaShoeva. Okay, let's go weiter. Tana Rabbana. Hechalil doiches HaShabbos divrei Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda v'chachamim omrim af yom toveinu doche. So we have a machlokus over here about playing of the flute. And you'll see the playing of the flute over here is unrelated to our Mishnah, but you'll see that in just a moment. The machlokus over here is, does it override Shabbos, the playing of the flute in the temple? Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda says it does, and the chachamim say that it does not. Not only does it not override Shabbos, but it doesn't even override Yontif. Amar Rav Yosef, machlokes b'shir shel karban. The Rav Yosef savar ikar shira b'chli v'avoda hi v'doches haShabbos. The Rabbanan savar ikar shira b'peh v'lav avoda hi v'eno doches haShabbos. This machlokes between Rav Yosef and the Chachamim is only in regard to the musical instruments that were played during the wine libation that was done on a daily basis, morning and evening, during the offering of the Korban Tamid. They used to play music when they offered the libations, when they poured the libations for the Korban Tamid. Now we know that music is a necessary component of avoda. That we know, Rashi says, based on psukim. That if you want to worship Hashem, Hashem says the proper way to worship me is with music. So for all of those stoic Litvaks who can't wait to get out of davening and don't have any tolerance or patience for singing and music, that clearly is a mistaken theology. because it's clear from everything that we're going to be learning today that the proper mode of worship of Hashem is through song, is through music. Because music, as we just mentioned, is the thing that brings down Ruach HaKodesh and connects you to the Ribono Shalom. The only machlokus that we have here is what is the mainstay of music? What is the principal integral component of music that is necessary when you're doing the avoda? Is it vocals or is it instrumentals?
Or is it both, maybe?
No. So the machlokus is, what is the main part? What is the ikr? What is the ikr and what is the tafa? So Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says that the ikr is the instrumental, is that rich sound of the cello playing, and therefore he says that's why it's Doicha Shabbos. It's Doicha Shabbos because without it you don't have the mainstay of music. And the Chachamim say that no, the main part of the integral part of avoda that's associated with shira is the vocals. And as long as you have vocals, you're fulfilling the criterion of music. Instrumentals is only a support, right? It's only an accompaniment. And since it's not crucial to have the instrumentals, it's not Doicha Shabbos.
When you learn from Sphira time, you can sing, but you can get this, on the music, you can't get the instruments, but you can get the...
Who said that Sphira has any application to this? Sphira, it's only a derabana, it's only a minig derabana.
But we learn from that, the ikar of simcha is the...
There's a distinction, you're saying.
Oh, you're saying that there's a distinction because we allow people to sing,
right?
But how do you know that's true? I don't even know that that's necessarily the truth. These people who say do this a cappella music, I don't even know what they're basing themselves on. But that's another discussion.
Exactly the same. Yeah.
Avol, shir shel shoeva, divrei hakol simchihi. But it's a good point, Mendel. It's worth an analysis. Avol shir shel shoeva, divrei hakol simchihi ve'eno doches Shabbos. But that's only a machlokes when you need music for the avoda. But everyone agrees that the music that we have at a Simchas Beis HaShoeva is not a biblical form of avoda. It's only a rabbinic institution to help people have joy on Sukkos. It's only midrabanan anyway, so everyone would agree, both Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda and the Chachamim would agree that it's not Doicha Shabbos. Amar Rav Yosef, Mina Amila debaha pligi. How debaha pligi? How can I prove to you? How I can show you that this is the basis of the machlokes, whether the mainstay of music is the instrumentals or the vocals? The Tanya, as the Brisa says, Kli shares sha'asan shel eitz Rebbe Poisel v'Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda machshir. We have a Brisa that says as follows. Normally we know that all ministering vessels in the temple are supposed to be made out of either precious or semi-precious metals. Gold, silver, copper. What happens if you make a bowl out of wood in the temple? Is it kosher or is it not kosher? So here's a machlokus between Rebbe and Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. Rebbe says it's no good, and Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says it's good. So my lav b'hakamifli. So Rabbi Yosef says, he suggests this is the machlokus. You know what it is? Man demach shir savar ikar shira b'chli v'yalfinun me'abuba demoshe uman deposel savar ikar shira b'peh v'lo yalfinun me'abuba demoshe. We know that Moshe Rabbeinu had a flute, and that's what he played to accompany the avoda in the Mishkan. Okay, he's one of the Levium, right? So he had a flute. What's a flute made out of? It's a reed. It's a wooden. It's a wood. It's a, what is it called? It's a wind instrument. But it's made out of a wood or a reed type of material. As a matter of fact, the Gemara says they wanted to beautify it, and they plated it with gold. And then when they played it, it didn't sound as good. So they had to remove the gold in order for it to have that rich, textured sound of a wood instrument. So you see that wood instruments are good for the Beis HaMikdash. If you learn that musical instruments are an integral part of avoda, so then you see that you can use wood as part of the avoda. And that proves to me that wooden utensils are acceptable in the temple. But if you learn that, if you hold that musical instrumentation is not the integral part and not the crucial part of the song, but rather the vocals are an important part of the song, then just because Moshe Rabbeinu's flute was made out of wood is indicative of nothing, because it was just an accompaniment. It's not a necessary component of music, and therefore it's not considered to be a crucial part of the avoda. So the Gemara, so you see, says Rav Yosef, this is the machlokas. And for the Gemara low, Dekule alma ikar shira bichli. Everyone holds that no. Everyone holds that the mainstay of the avoda of shira, of music, is the instrumentals. V'hacha b'danen efsher mishi efsher kamiflagi. Man de machshir savar danen efsher mishi efsher. Man de pasel savar ein danen efsher mishi efsher. The machlokas could be very simple like this. Maybe really the musical instrument is the main part of the avoda, is the crucial part of the thing that you're supposed to do in the Beis HaMikdash. But the question is like this. Since I can only make a flute out of wood, can I extrapolate from there to say that other vessels that don't need to be made out of wood can be made out of wood? Or no? Do I say that only things that can only be wooden must be made out of wood, but those things that don't need to be made out of wood, efsher, they can be made out of other materials. You can't derive just because it's efsher, just because the flute can only be made out of wood, you can't extrapolate from there to things that can be made out of gold and silver. And so therefore, that's the machlokas. Rabbi says just because the flute was wooden doesn't mean that you can extend it and say that other utensils that don't need to be made out of that cheap wood can be made out of wood. And Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says, no, you can. I'll give you another explanation. Maybe everyone holds that the mainstay of music is the vocals, and it's got nothing to do with Moshe Rabbeinu's flute. Or alternatively, everyone holds that there's no way to extrapolate from the wooden flute to other kalim because you can't compare one to the other. And here we're talking about a totally different machlokas, got nothing to do with musical instruments. The machlokas between Rabbi and Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda in this brisa has to do with how you do the hermeneutic teachings of the Torah. And here, just by way of introduction, there's a famous machlokas that appears many times in Shas. There are two systems of hermeneutic derivation. One is called the klal uprat uklal system, and the other one is called the riboy umiut, the riboy system. Now, that in and of itself is problematic. How is it that in Torah Sheba'al Peh we have two competing systems of hermeneutic teachings? You would think that there should be only one system of derivation. The answer probably is that at one time there was only one system of derivation and it was lost. And there are two traditions as to how you do the hermeneutic teachings. But let me tell you in a nutshell what the difference of opinion is. It's a very subtle difference. The principle of klal upratu klal essentially says like this. When the Torah makes a general statement followed by a specific statement, then it usually means to tell me that the specific statement is defining the general statement. And then when that is followed by a general statement, it's coming to tell me that if you want to be able to extrapolate from the specific to other examples, you have to have those other examples be as closely similar to the specific example of the Torah as possible. So if the Torah tells you that something's got to be made out of gold, for example, then everything else has to be very, very close to gold in order to fit into the klal uprat uklal system. If, however, you use the hermeneutic system of riboy, miut, and riboy, then whenever you have a general statement followed by a specific statement, the specific statement is not completely delimiting the general statement, and especially not when it's followed by a riboy, when it's followed by another general statement. Really, if you learn riboy, miut, and riboy, it's only giving you one example of a variety of things that are possible for this mitzvah to be fulfilled. And the only reason why the Torah lists one specific example is to delimit one thing that is the exactly extreme opposite of that one example. So if, for example, the Torah tells you a general principle, a riboy, and then it gives you one example of gold, so the only thing that would be excluded from that would be the thing that is most extremely different from gold. And everything else is included. So now let's bring this to the specific issue over here. Rabbi Darish Klali Uprati, Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda Darish Ribui Miute. And this is the machlokas. Rabbi Darish Klali Uprati. Let's see how he views the pasuk by the menorah. The Torah says, V'yasisa menoras. The Torah says, make a menorah. So that's the first general statement. It doesn't tell you at the first two words what it's supposed to be made out of. So that's the klal. Zahav tahor prat. Then it tells you the specifics, and it tells you it has to be made out of pure gold. Then miksha te'aseh ha-menorah, and then it says it must be of beaten material. So therefore, that's chazar v'kol. That's a general statement because you can beat a lot of different kinds of materials. Klal uprat uklal iatada en elakein haprat mahaprat mefurash shel mateches af kol shel mateches. So therefore, using Rebbe's system of klal uprat uklal, where the prat, where the specific example, helps to define the parameters of the general law. So if I have the example of being gold, then anything else that's going to be a klisharis like the menorah must be made out of something that is closely analogous to gold, which is the family of metals, or I should say precious or semi-precious metals, such as silver and copper. So that's the system of klalu pratu klal. Now let's go look at the system of riboy miut and riboy. Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda darish ribuy and miute. He uses the slightly different system, which is v'asisa menoras riba. He looks at the first statement, the general statement, which is make a menorah. Zahav tohor miyet. Then he says it should be made out of pure gold. That's the limiting clause. That's the specific example. Miksha teyasa menorah chazer v'riba. And then the last part of the sentence is it should be made out of beaten material. So that's an inclusive clause. So ribo miyut v'riba ribe akol. So therefore he says, no, the specific example is not coming to define and delimit the general category. The general category is make it out of whatever you'd like. My Rabbi kol mile. And therefore when the Torah is telling you make the clay shares to be like the menorah, you can make them out of anything. And my miyet shel cheres. And the only reason why the Torah uses the specific example of gold is to exclude the thing that is most distant to gold, which is earthenware. Earthenware is the cheapest material. Gold is the most expensive material. So therefore, the way that we're viewing this system is this is the machlokes. According to Rabbi, you are limited in what the klei sharis may be made out of because of the klal upratu klal system, which says it has to be analogous to gold, and therefore you can only make the other klei sharis out of metal. According to Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, he uses the riboy miut and riboy system, which is much more liberal in the way that it allows you to interpret these phrases. The example that's given of gold in the Torah does not define the category. It only tells you that there's one example, one thing that cannot fit into the general category, and that's earthenware. But everything else, including wood, is fair game. So that's the machlokes between Rebbe and Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda.
But how does Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda then deal with the last part of the classic that it has to be from beaten material? You don't beat wood.
You sure? No, you can beat wood. Beating could be using a specific kind of tool, like a shaver or whatever they call it, a chisel. You can use a chisel to beat gold also. Yeah. Okay. Amar Rav Papa. Speak to your local carpenter. Rav Papa now says, Kitanai. Rav Papa now tells us that this machlokes that we said before about what music is, what is the definition of music? Is it primarily, is the main part of music the vocals, or is the main part of music the instrumentals? This is a machlokes tanoim. Ditznan, avdei kohanim hayu, divrei Reb Meir, Reb Yossi omer mishpachas beis hapagorim umishpachas beis tzifrayo umei amaum hayu, shayu mesin lekuhuna, and Rabbi Chanina ben Antignos omer leviim hayu. This is a Mishnah in Erechin, which talks about the people who were in charge of playing music in the Beis HaMikdash when the Karbanos were being brought. We have three opinions as to who these people were. One opinion is that they were slaves of the Kohanim. They didn't have any special pedigree whatsoever. They could even be Avadim. And that's the first opinion of Rebbe Meir. Rebbe Yossi says no. They were not Kohanim, they were not Leviim, but they were very well pedigreed Yisraelim. So much so that we know the names of the families. Their names were Beis Pegarim and Beis Tzifraya. We know what region they came from. It was a region called Amaum. And they were very, very miyuchas. They had lots of good yichus, so much so that Kohanim families would make shiduchim with these families. And those were the people who played the music. And the third opinion is the opinion of Rabbi Chanina, and he says, no, they were dafka Levim. They could only be Levim who could play this music. My lav bahaka miflagi. So let's assume that this is the machlokas. Deman da'amar avadim hayu kesaver ikashira b'peh, uman da'amar Levim hayu kesaver ikashira b'chli. So the machlokas, it would seem, is as follows. If you hold that the mainstay of music, since it's considered to be a form of avoda, if the mainstay of music is the instrumentation, so the people playing the musical instruments had to be from the Levi family. And that's why Rabbi Chanina says they had to be Levium. But if you hold that the mainstay of music is the vocals and not the instrumentals is merely an accompaniment, so then the people playing the musical instruments were not doing avoda. They could be anybody, and they could even be avodim, they could even be slaves. So that seems to be the machlokas. So the Gemara says, no, wait a minute. V'tispira Rabbi Yossi Maika Savar. But wait a minute, what about the middle opinion of Rabbi Yossi, who says that they were Yisraelim, but they were from Meyuchas families? Ika Savar Ikar Shira B'Pafilo Avodim Nami. Ika Savar Ikar Shira B'Chli Leviim In Yisraelim Lo. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yossi doesn't make any sense. He doesn't fit into either category, because if you say that the instrumentals is the mainstay of the avoda, then Rabbi Yossi should only require them to be Levium. He can't allow them to be Yisraelim. And if the instrumentals are not an integral part of the avoda, but they're just an accompaniment, so then why did he say that they had to be dafka from a meyuchas family? Let them be avodim. You don't need to have any type of yuchas at all. So the Gemara answer is Ela dekuli alma ikashira b'peh uvahaka miflagi. So rather, the Gemara concludes, no, that's not the machlokas of this brayse. So the machlokas of this brayse has got nothing to do with what the status of the musical instruments was. Everyone holds that the instruments are not the mainstay of shira, not the mainstay of music. Music is defined by the vocals. But the machlokas is as follows: the mar savar hachi hava maisa, umar savar hachi hava maisa. The machlokas is what historically was done in the times of the Beis Hamikdash. Who typically who typically played the music? And this is the three machlokas. The Gemara's now question is l'may nafkamin. Who cares? The Mishnah is not here to record to us what was done historically if there's no halachic ramification. So the Gemara answer is Lamalin miduchan liyuchsin ulamaiser kamiflagi. The answer is no. There is a very important ramification. When you saw a guy up there in the Beis Hamikdash on the platform with his beautiful tuxedo and white bow tie, playing his oboe, I'm superimposing the modern image of the professional musician, right? He's up there playing his oboe, and he's got this. Is beautifully coiffed and he's groomed and he looks amazing. So the question is, oh, what a nice bacher, handsome young man. Maybe he's good for a shidduch. Talented guy, he plays beautiful music, right? So should I make a shidduch for my daughter or not? So that's the question. The other question is he a Levi as far as my being able to give him my meiser? Because a guy that plays such beautiful music, of course, I want the Zechus of giving a musician my meiser instead of giving it to a tone-deaf Levi. So those are the two nafkaminas. Man da'amar avadim hayu kasavrein malin miduchin liyuchsin v'lo lemeiser. If you hold that they could have been even avadim who were playing the music, so then no matter how handsome and well-groomed this guy is, if he's an eved, I'm not going to make a shidduch for my daughter. And certainly I'm not going to give him my meiser because I know that he could be an eved. If you hold that these were meyuchas people and they would only select people from the finest families, so then you could make a shidduch for your daughter when you saw this handsome boy chick up there playing the music, but you couldn't give him your meiser because he could have been a Yisrael. And if you hold that they were dafka Leviim who played the music, then alamailas. He's got. You can make a shidduch for your daughter, and you can give him your meiser. It's got nothing to do with whether the main part of music is instrumentals or vocals. And this is where we'll hold it for today.
Still sounds like a